Hey, greetings everyone. It is GleeCon, and I'm back again, bringing you another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On the last episode, we finally finished up completely Ashenvale, Black Fathom Deeps, all of that, and we moved on to Stranglethorn. So we have another zone in the Pipe 5x5. We'll be picking up with the Horde version of Stone Talon Mountains on the very next episode. And then our horde will almost be caught up to our alliance as we're kind of riding that curve. And then things, I think, will smooth out from there. We've also been playing through, reading through the World of Warcraft Official Magazine. This is the third issue of the first volume. And Wrath of the Lich King is about to close, and Cataclysm's about to open up as we read this issue. Probably by the next one, I think Cataclysm will be in full swing. It might be there right now. I think this is really like the bleeding edge borderline of when it was about to come out. Print magazines have all but died nowadays. There are even the couple that I have been religious long-time subscribers to. You can't even get physical copies anymore, so that's a thing of the past. But this magazine was ahead of its time in going defunct before it really had gone very far at all. So stay a while and listen as we dive into this issue. We're going to do, last time we did like some cosplay and they talked about being in beta and some other stuff. This time we're going to kick off with the tactics. These are very interesting because the game is not really played the same way nowadays as it was then. For instance, everything in Classic can be dealt with from the very last patch. One of the biggest changes to that is the Chrono, whatever it's called, the little item that you can buy from Chromie and store world buffs, and then you have raids strategically getting Ren drops, and then there's a whole timer thing. So basically permanently having the rallying cry buff is just a big part of the strategy. It's massive for a lot of people. And it makes things a lot easier, I would imagine, to have everybody in the raid having such a massive buff. We also have... I've been wrong. For some reason, I thought that was something you had to have skill in engineering to have. No, that's not true. There might be other things that are useful for engineering, but that's just an item anyone can use, so that's cool. So I was kind of under the impression that you had to be, and I made the comment a bunch of times, you had to be engineer. And I don't think that's quite as accurate. I still think it has a lot of things that disproportionately make it powerful, but it's not as completely essential in the meta as I once thought. So we're going to look at this. This looks like we're going to do Ruby Sanctum. Yeah, defending the Ruby Sanctum. This is a raid, easily soloable nowadays. It says the Black Dragonflight has invaded the Ruby Sanctum, seeking to crush the Wormrest Accord. So this is still taking place in Wrath of the Lich King times. Things may have settled down in the Obsidian Sanctum, but all is not well in Wormrest Temple. Steel yourself for another epic battle. A powerful war party of the Black Dragonflight has launched an assault upon the Ruby Sanctum beneath Wormrest Temple. By destroying the Sanctum, the Black Dragonflight looks to crush those who would stand in the way of their master's reemergence into Azeroth, with the ultimate goal of shattering the Wormrest Accord, the sacred bond that unites the Dragonflights. Alright, so this is like a kind of borderline right when Cataclysm's about to drop. The true leader of the strike force is a fearsome twilight dragon named Halion, raised in captivity from the eggs created by Sinestra almost 2 years ago, and unleashed upon the world for the first time, eager to test its powers. The dragon is adept at phasing between the material plane and the Twilight Realm, and used that power to bring the strike force past Wormrest's defenses and launch a surprise assault. Almost all of the inhabitants of the Ruby Sanctum were slain in the assault, and the corpses of red drakes and dragonkin litter the green fields. On one edge of the sanctum, a single surviving dragon was able to blockade herself against inside a hollow beneath one of the glade's trees, but the besieging invaders are relentless. The Twilight Dragon has phased away to attend to other matters, leaving their 3 lieutenants, Saviana Ragefire, Baltharas the Warborn, and General Zerithrian, to handle cleaning up any survivors and securing the area. Now it's up to you and your party to stop this unprecedented offensive and defend this Ruby Sanctum. I like that we're getting the lore behind that attack. I don't think I ever really knew all that before. The Ruby Sanctum features 10 and 25 player content, heroic difficulties, and all new rewards. There's one major boss, Halion, and his 3 lieutenants must be cleared before he will confront your party. I don't think it's a very long raid. So there's Saviana Ragefire. Saviana Ragefire is one of the lieutenants, will attack your party with fire breath and periodically takes flight to fling fiery orbs that disorient their targets. Be careful of her occasional temper tantrums, during which she attacks faster and pulses fire novas. She can be tranquilized during these fits. Baltharis the Warborn. Baltharis the Warborn casts a debuff on a random non-tank that saps the might of nearby allies, siphoning it to bolster Baltharis' assault, allowing him to deal more damage. At certain points during the fight, you'll have to deal with a clone of Baltharis. And General Zarithrian. General Zarithrian applies a stacking armor debuff on the player. Tanking him periodically sends everyone scurrying with an intimidating shout and summons fiery casters to aid him in battle. Once your team has dispatched these 3 lieutenants, it's time to meet the true boss. The true leader of the strike force is Halion, a fearsome twilight dragon eager to test its powers. Loot matters. It's not a boss without loot, right? Halion's goodies range from item level 258 for the 10-player version to item level 284 for the 25-player heroic version. The Halion fight consists of 3 phases. Alright, so yeah, this is actually a short tactics one. Phase 1. Halion behaves like most dragons, breathing fire, cleaving enemies in front, and tail swiping those behind. His unique abilities include a meteor strike that targets a player at range and causes random streams of fire to spread after impact, and fiery combustion, a debuff on a random player that causes an explosion, knocking back nearby allies and leaves a patch of flame on the ground when dispelled. Be careful because the radius and intensity of its effects depend on how much time elapsed before fiery combustion was dispelled. At 75%, Halion vanishes, leaving a large portal behind. Players need to go through it to begin the next phase. Phase 2. Inside the portal, players find themselves in the Twilight Realm like the Drake portals from the Sartharian encounter. Here, Halion has shadow-based abilities. He now breathes Dark Breath, and Meteor Strike has been replaced with Twilight Cutter, a very high-damage beam that is periodically channeled between spheres orbiting the edge of the battle area. Fiery Combustion is replaced with Soul Consumption, which has similar mechanics, but pulls nearby players in instead of knocking them back. At 50%, Halion opens 2 small portals back out to the normal world. He now exists in both planes. This is Phase 3. Halion exists in both the physical and Twilight realms simultaneously, and players have to deal with a new mechanic called Corporeality. He starts out the phase 50% corporeal in each realm. In other words, half in the physical realm and half in the Twilight realm. Every 15 seconds, whichever version of him takes more damage becomes less corporeal, and the version of him that takes less damage becomes more corporeal. The more corporeal he is in a given realm, the more damage he deals and takes, and vice versa. If he's ever entirely ignored in one realm or the other, no players are in combat with him, he will begin to regenerate health. These split versions of Halion share the same health pool, and reducing it to 0 ends the encounter. You win. It seems like you could maybe sort of split the raid. Heroic mode offers more of a challenge. Halion will have much more health, and in each phase, players will have to deal with extra twists, such as an extra Twilight Cutter and Fiery Combustion and Soul Consumption zones that affect both realms. Okay. Alright, so that's it. We're now moving on to community called Raiding the Physical World. So maybe, it says community, so maybe these are things people are doing in the real world. For some players, chatting, questing, raiding, and running dungeons together, it just isn't enough. Gangs of guilds will often meet up to hang out, throw epic parties, and talk about or even play World of Warcraft, and yours can too. I mean, that does sound fun. Here's some pictures of these real-life players that play together. You know, it's kind of like the couples that play together stay together. Same goes for guilds, I guess. You're never alone in World of Warcraft. It's nearly impossible to jump into Azeroth without having some interaction with other players. Joining a guild and playing with people you like and know, at least virtually, enriches the experience, but it doesn't have to stop when you log out for the night. Many guilds have turned real world into a meeting hall. If a guild can successfully coordinate weekly efforts to tackle 10 and 25 player raids, runs through heroics and PvP battles in Wintergrass and arenas, then certainly that guild has the wherewithal to plan a get-together. It may take time, but consider it a way to build friendship rep. Sure. Getting a plan together doesn't have to be a painful experience. Most guilds tend to pick a location central to its members, while other guilds prefer heading off en masse to larger events like BlizzCon. Whatever the case, don't let logistics become overwhelming. Remember, this is the same group that downed Sindragosa last week, so planning a weekend jaunt should be a piece of delicious chocolate cake. Velhareg, a gnome warlock in the Knights Who Say Knee, that's pretty cool, guild on the Ice Crown US realm agrees. I think I've actually seen that. I don't know if it's a newer incarnation or if we read it previously in this magazine, but I feel like that seems familiar to me. Forming a large gathering can appear daunting, yet it's not that difficult. The first thing to do is find a venue. The thing is to coordinate a time when most people can make it and get options for hotels and such. Once schedules have been aligned and travel plans arranged, the possibilities for what to do are as wide open as the Barrens. For guilds looking for something to do that's more structured than simply hanging out, checking out BlizzCon as a group can make for a great time, especially if people haven't attended the convention before. Sure, this is like a promo. The greatest part was just hearing everyone talk without wearing a headset. Some of the people did not look like I imagined they would, but that's part of the fun. I guess that's true, and that whole looks part of it doesn't really match as much anymore because with Discord and everything, a lot of the times you have pictures, like the guilds that I've been serious as members of, like everyone's posting their pictures online and stuff like that. And there's so many like streamers. Keen Nguyen of Mal'Ganis US was founded, Kine Nguyen? I don't know. Mal'Ganis US, founded back in 2007. They've met up on multiple occasions, including a small-scale meetup at Disney World and a large-scale meetup at Niagara Falls, where they bravely unlocked their Going Down achievement. That's kind of fun. Looks like they have like some Guitar Hero going on, too. We had 12 guildies at BlizzCon in 2009, says Ania, a human priest in the My Other Mount is Tauren guild on Airy Peak, US. This brought in, I feel like I've seen that one, too. This brought in some of our more centrally located folks with representation from Canada, Minnesota, New York, Delaware, Virginia, California, and Maryland. For me, honestly, the chance to catch up with my guildmates was the primary reason for attending BlizzCon in the first place. The chance to grab dinner and geek out over Cataclysm news each night with the MMO ITs. What? Totally worth it. Oh, My Other Mount is Taurens. Okay, got it. For those who prefer something more hands-on or exotic, hosting live-action role-playing or hitting the Outback is always an option. Well, sort of. In our first get-together, we hosted arena-style fighting with foam swords, says Impulsive, a level 80 Night Elf warrior and guildmaster of the Divinity Guild on the Trollbane US realm. Our second get-together was at a wonderful animal refuge called The Wilds. To advertise the get-together to our guildmates, we created a brochure complete with pictures of real animals, zebra, buffalo, that would be located at The Wilds, but also included screen caps of the animals found in the Barrens. Evadne, a level 80 Night Elf priest in the Napalm Guild on the Uldum US realm, recommends a not exactly last resort. 9 of us rented a cabin at a local resort and spent the weekend together. It was so much fun, no one wanted to go home. We went shopping at a local store for supplies, had an epic sword fight in the toy aisle, and I had a random stranger come up to me and ask, "Do you always have this much fun shopping with these guys?" as I was snapping pictures. I smiled and said, "Actually, I just met them." We went to the arcade at the resort and rode rides and played games like kids, played pool at the bar in the main lounge, watched movies, and otherwise just sat around eating great food and enjoying each other's company. Sure, I mean, why not? Just because everyone in the guild loves and plays World of Warcraft doesn't mean that everyone is cut from the same mold. In fact, many players are stunned at how diverse their online friends are in person. College students and office managers, waiters and bus drivers, high school seniors and single moms. When it comes to guildmates, players from all walks of life and in every shape, size, and disposition. One thing that serves as a uniting factor at any guild's first get-together is the voices. Guildmaster Andrew Mathew can help you start a guild of your own. The Incredibles of Boulder Fist US held their very own Incredicon almost yearly to gather, play games, and gain a well-fed buff. That's actually pretty cool, too. My first guild met at a dark Mexican restaurant the first time we got together, and the only way we knew each other was when people started opening their mouths, says Jean Genie, a human mage from the Exiles Guild on the Kilrog US realm. The greatest part was just hearing everyone talk without wearing a headset. Some of the people did not look like I imagined they would, but that's part of the fun. Food rules and guild parties are some of the best places to get some good grub on. As plenty of well-fed guildmates can attest to, we are mostly from Oregon and real-life friends and family, says Baz Mordoth, an undead mage from the Details of War Guild on Senjin, US, but we have met so many wonderful people in the game. We have a resto shaman who's really looking forward to bringing her famous jello shots, and my wife and I, the guildmasters, are in charge of the hot dogs. How about Gert's Gumbo? Epic, apparently, but you can only sample it if you show up, according to Gertrudis, a Blood Elf mage and roundtable from Skywall, US. My guild is 5 years old and has had guild parties for the past 4 summers. One of our guildmates has a large home that happens to be conveniently located for many of the guild members, and they've been kind enough to host the events. Yes, Gert cooks for these occasions. No, Gert will not send you any gumbo. For everyone who can agree on the power of good eats, there are likely just as many who are looking for a night out on the town, and who better to hit Las Vegas with than your tank and healer. Just ask the guilds who have met there multiple times for annual and semi-annual get-togethers. Guilds like the Ancient Order and the Serpents on Archimond, US. Look at this. Rockborn Rhino a la Loxin. Improves eyesight. Before I made this, I couldn't see the tank. Cool down 1 second. Interesting. It's like they made their own little cards. That's cool. Some cosplay stuff going on. In October of 2005, my then guild Serpents had a meetup in Las Vegas for a long weekend. It says Orc Shaman, another FOTM. I don't know what FOTM means. I got to think about it. But there were members of from the UK, Buffalo, Seattle, Phoenix, New Mexico, Nevada, and Texas. It was really actually nice to meet people that you've been playing with for a year or more, although I had a lot of doubts. I went there like, what if they are all stereotypical basement dwellers? They all turned out to be normal people. We spent the weekend drinking, gambling, and just hanging out, had a proper meal together, and still have stories mostly about attending certain establishments and consuming certain beverages, which we talk about nearly 5 years on. I mean, why not? Yeah. Of all the things a guild can do together when meeting in person, it might be hard to imagine that some get together simply to play the game, but they do. Zazie, a troll mage from the Kirin Tor US realm, explains that the Warbringer Guild just can't get enough of playing. A bunch of the Warbringers met up this year in California. I can't tell you how exciting it was to meet those smoking hot blood elf chicks who turned out to be dudes, or how awesome it was to talk to the person who had never said a word in Vent before. We booked tickets in advance to see Medieval Times, which turned out to be a blast. We also went bowling, to the movies, and out to dinner a few times. This was right around Valentine's Day, so we spent a romantic night in the hotel room, staring up at the laptops to slay some holiday bosses. All in all, it was a great experience, and I can't wait for our next get-together. Even though some play when they get together, many don't. Elnar, a Draenei shaman from the Anointed Guild on the Medivh US realm, calls out the benefits of interpersonal relationships going beyond the game. It was really nice to put faces to names and build a friendship outside of the game that will last longer than just World of Warcraft. If only they knew. It was awesome. 3 days of no World of Warcraft, just hanging out and really getting to know one another. It's amazing, really, that in this game, we get to meet people we would have no chance to encounter outside the game. However guilds decide to approach getting together, keep in mind that the first meeting entails all the usual awkwardness found in real life. Some players may be shy, some may be boisterous, and others may be somewhere in the middle. While you're planning things, try to think about each of the players who will be attending, what they like and what they don't like. Think back to all those late nights on Vent when people shared their interest outside of the game. Vullering puts it like this. Vullering? With a few hours of research invested and a little bit of preparation, you can make real-life guild meetings great fun. And I feel like the most shy, probably, they might not even come. That's a ton of people in the middle. And some of these, they're really bringing the whole guild. Guild gatherings can range from shindigs to full-blown parties, as shown by Hawaiians at the bottom. That's kind of cool, a Hawaiians guild. Nocturne, top middle. The Syndicate, bottom middle. And Zodiac Braves, top. Okay, so that's top middle. Yeah, look at these people. The Syndicate, that is a freaking huge guild. All right, so now we're moving on to another article called Moving to Cataclysm Means Shifting Gear, and the landscape isn't the only thing changing. Check your gear. It's cool, Draenei, but of course, stat changes. The upcoming Cataclysm promises to change most of World of Warcraft, and items are no exception. The stats that define the capabilities of your characters are evolving, and items must follow suit. As World of Warcraft has matured, the stat system has prevented the developers with increasingly complex issues. Many of the current stats are confusing, and the interrelations can appear convoluted. Do you know the 5 different stats affected by defense? Answer: chance to be hit, chance to be critically hit, dodge, parry, and block. Which contributes to damage, attack power, or armor penetration? Answer: both. The developers have said that the goal is to make gear choices more interesting and less confusing by making each stat more valuable to more players. That's the underlying design behind the itemization changes scheduled for Cataclysm. What does it mean for your characters? Some stats will be undergoing large changes or even disappearing altogether. Some stats won't go away, but you won't see them directly on gear anymore. Instead, they'll be derived from other stats. The Cataclysm stat changes that drive this new approach to itemization can be sorted into 3 different categories. First, there are stats that actually appear on items. These will be a combination of the familiar old stats and some newly introduced stats. Then there are the old stats that are sticking around but won't be visible on your items. These will be derived from the visible stats. Finally, there are the stats that will be going away completely. Following is a breakdown of what's going on in each of those categories. Okay. And this is something that they've been jiggering with for a long time now. Stats directly on your gear. Stamina, spirit, strength, agility, intellect, haste, parry, armor, resilience, hit, expertise, critical strike, and resilience will appear on gear. Some of that, well, resilience, they just wrote down twice, but some of that now is even gone. I feel like haste might be gone. Parry might be gone. Hit, I'm almost 100% sure is gone. I don't even think spirit exists as a stat anymore. Some will function much the same way that they do now, but the following stats will make their debuts or change significantly. Mastery, that's a big one now. Mastery is a new stat that improves whatever talent tree a player decides to pursue. The gains are dependent upon class and talent specialization choices. Yeah, now there's really only 4 stats. It's haste. Actually, I lied when I said haste wasn't. Haste is. It's haste, mastery, maybe crit is one, and versatility. Stamina. Non-plate wearers will end up with more stamina than before, such that health pools will be closer to each other. This is partially a byproduct of how strength, agility, and intellect will be assigned. That's fallen by the wayside. Like, tanks have so much more life than non-tanks. Spirit. This should only appear on gear worn by healing classes. Other casters will have alternate ways to regenerate mana. Healing classes and damage rolls will be able to gain hit from spirit. Intellect. This stat will grant spell power. Okay. Agility. This stat will no longer provide 2 armor per point of agility. It will continue to provide critical strike chance and now provides 2 attack power per point instead of 1 for hunters, shamans, rogues, and druids. Haste. Melee classes and hunters should find haste more attractive in Cataclysm, as it will be designed to allow them to regain resources, think energy or runes, faster, and thus let them do more things more often. Parry. Parry and dodge now have the same cost and are affected at the same rate by diminishing returns. Parry will still provide a slight speed up on the player's next attack, but creatures no longer benefit from that effect. Yeah, parry I think is gone. Armor. The way armor works will now be largely the same way it does now, but the difference in mitigation among armor types will be changing so that plate isn't so far ahead of mail, leather, and cloth. Resilience. Currently, this stat reduces the chance to receive critical strikes or spell critical strikes, reducing the damage taken from those criticals, reduces damage taken from players, and reduces the effects of mana drains. In Cataclysm, it will only affect damage, normal and critical, done by players. So it's a PvP thing only, and I think it's gone now. Pretty sure it's gone. Okay, out of sight, out of mind. These stats will be removed from items. However, they'll still be in the game and matter to your character. Attack power. Strength and agility will determine the amount of attack power your character has. The precise translation of those stats to attack power will vary by class. Spell power. Casters will get spell power from intellect. There is an exception for caster weapons. Spell power will appear on those so that they can be made proportionately as powerful for casters as weapons are for melee classes. Armor penetration. This will still exist in talents and abilities. Block grading. Block is being redesigned so that blocked attacks will hit for 30% less damage. This allows the stat to scale better as your gear improves. Block won't appear directly on items, but will continue to be granted by abilities and talents and may be granted by mastery for shield-wearing classes. Shield block value. This won't appear on items due to the changes in block, that straight 30% damage reduction mentioned above, but talents and other effects could modify the block percentage, meaning that shield block value chills in the shadows until it's called on to change. Yeah, and it's way different now too. Like before it used to be OP, like you could have a block build and your damage might go way down, but you'd be able to survive certain heavy-hitting bosses. Say goodbye. Mana per 5. The classes that benefited from this stat, namely paladins and shamans, will instead benefit from the spirit stat like other healers. I don't even think Mana per 5 exists in Classic. Defense. This stat has been the mainstay benchmark for tanks. Reach a certain number and you knew that you could not be subjected to a critical hit. With the removal of this stat, tanks will become uncritical by shifting to the appropriate stance, form, or presence. Paladins will use Righteous Fury. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of silly. I'm glad they're getting rid of that. Other changes. Other stats will change as well in addition to those you see on gear. For example, weapon skill will disappear. Classes will start with proficiency in the appropriate weapons, and skills won't need to be improved. Spell ranks like Flash Heal, rank 1, and Flash Heal, rank 2 won't exist. Each spell will have one rank that will scale according to your character's level. I love that change. Another important thing to remember about Cataclysm gear is that you won't necessarily be stuck with the stats the gear carries when you grab it off a monster. A new ability called Reforging will be available. Reforging will allow you to transfer some of the stats on an item into other stats. There will be some rules on how this works. For example, changing stamina to something else may be severely restricted, but it's an avenue for further customization of gear. So if you can't bear the thought of more hit on your armor, you'll have a way to remedy it. While we're talking about stats, let's not forget about gems. Gems are an important source of gear customization for players, and with these stat changes, gems will have to change too. The most visible difference will be the colors for some stats will change. For example, hit is currently yellow, but it might end up being blue in Cataclysm. Okay. All right, I guess that's the end of that article. Now we're on to Epic Looters, a chat with the folks who design the items you can't play without. This will probably be our last article for the day. So we have item design. This is the team, 4 dudes. And last time, 1 or 2 ago, we met with quest design. Look at that. Throw the cover article, the cover art onto the magazine right there. That's nice. So Owen Landgren is this dude. He's a game designer. Travis Day, this dude, also a game designer. Jonathan LeCraft, another game designer. Greg Street, the lead systems designer. And Chris Zayerhut, senior technical game designer. Okay. Loot makes the World of Warcraft go around. From the mighty Lich King to the lowly kobold vermin, all mobs need loot, but it's not totally random. Somebody has to have a plan and put those items there. World of Warcraft Official Magazine talked with some of the folks behind Azeroth's item design to find out how they do it, what their favorite items are, and what they won't be doing again. Can you take us through the process of making an item? Typically, we start with a blank Excel sheet and lay out all the bosses and their loot tables in a template. How many items, what we're going to need, etc. Every time a group kills a boss, we want there to be items that everyone is after, so there aren't any dead spots, and to avoid having half of your raid not care about killing a boss. We base the decision on what the class team has done, which specs are relevant, and which items we haven't necessarily covered recently or there's been a desire to see more of. It's based on community feedback, game balance, and specifically trying to make sure that how we stack the items reflects what the class team is trying to accomplish. So at this point, it's a big list like two-handed axe number 1, two-handed axe number 2. Yeah, at this point, it's basically just working with a spreadsheet. It's fun to work in Excel. It's easy to get the big picture of the zone and start plugging away. Okay, this guy's going to drop a tank helm. This one's going to drop healer gear. Over here, we can put the healer mace. Oh, and make sure the trinkets are dispersed in the zone as best as possible. So there's constantly someone who's excited about the next boss, if not everyone in the raid. Okay. We're pretty much known as the Excel team. I think that's our biggest tool. It's a little nerdy, but that's how we actually keep track of everything. That's pretty much my job, except I equally use Excel and Sheets depending on what I'm working with, but that's pretty much my life. How do you place the items in a dungeon and determine who drops what? The encounter designers will give us ideas like, here's what the bosses are, and here's how the zone's going to flow. For example, with Ulduar, they explained how the zone would be linear for some bosses, and then another group of bosses would be in different wings. On top of that, there'd be this guy called Algalon who's just going to crush your soul. So we say, okay, let's put better loot on him and make sure there's something for everybody. So if you finally get past the soul crushing, everyone is happy. And since these are the wing bosses, they're going to be the ones that drop set pieces. A lot of effort goes into making sure it feels like you're being appropriately rewarded for the difficulty and that you're not seeing a lot of redundant itemization. We might have 2 two-handed axes in a zone, but one will be at the beginning of the zone and one at the end. And we'll make some modifications to make you feel like even if you got the one at the front, you really want the one at the back. There's always that carrot to keep you pressing forward and killing the bosses. Pretty much known as the Excel team. I think that's our biggest tool. That's a cool tour in there. It's amazing how much value players will place on something that no player power at all just because it's rare and cool. That's true. That's probably the biggest thing. The Headless Horseman's Helm. That's pretty cool. This item, which drops only during the annual Hallow's End event, has the popular extra ability of enabling the wearer to laugh maniacally on demand. That is actually pretty cool. Where do the item names come from? It depends on how important the item is. Arthas's weapons and items, for example, get more tender, loving care than items from a random elemental boss or dragon. If we really feel something is spectacularly amazing, they'll put some flavor text on it to help sell it as a special item. We've gotten assistance from the Quest design team and World design team on giving us names in the past. Naming typically involves many different people if we're not directly responsible for it ourselves. You tend to exhaust your vocabulary relatively quickly. I think that in the Burning Crusade, Chris Metzen and Sean Carnez went through and named everything. The names actually reflected the things they were passionate about. Sean loved Tenacious D, so we had the Tenacious Defender. We try to make sure that we have sorts of pop culture references or comical items here and there. One of the new Goblin Quest rewards is called Best Bracer Ever, which is probably not since it's around level 5. A lot of the World Drop Bind On Equip Blue items you can get have been named after various employees' kids. We very frequently get employees saying, "Hey, I just had a kid," or "Can you name something after my 2-year-old daughter?" We're always more than happy to entertain those. There are quite a few items named after players. How does that come about? We really value community input. Players like Aldriana, Astrilian, and others have really put a ton of work into making the game better for other players. We feel like that's a good reason to sort of immortalize them in digital ink. Before I worked at Blizzard, I learned to tank by reading Satrina's posts on how protection warrior mechanics work. I got Stylene's impending Scarab and Blackwing Lair, and one of the things I wanted to do when I got here was kind of pay Satrina back for doing so much awesome theory crafting with a really great trinket, Satrina's impeding Scarab. Okay, cool. Satrina's, because he got Stylene's. Got it. Okay. It's something they really appreciate. We've seen the reactions on people's faces and heard them when they find out, oh my god, there's an item named after me. And they're bouncing off walls. It's something that we enjoy and they just love, especially when all their friends are like, that's so cool, I can't believe that. How'd you do that? At what point do you determine the appearance of the items? We're not directly responsible for creating the art, though occasionally we'll give the artists guidance. A lot of times, Alex Afrasiabi will give the art team some direction, like what a zone is about, the lore behind everything you're killing, what the feel of the zone should be. So when the player sees the axe from Icecrown Citadel and the axe from Ulduar, there are very distinct differences, and you can associate what the art looks like with the whole story of the raid tier. A really good example of that is Trial of the Crusader, where if you're Alliance, you get one kind of art and your character looks one way, and if you're Horde, your character looks completely different. So you have a sort of competing factions element built into the itemization, the lore, and the various battles that you fight. After we receive the art assets, we hook them up to the items that we've made. We make sure that when we attach a piece of art to a dagger intended for a rogue, and attach a piece of art to a dagger intended for a mage or warlock, that you can tell just by looking at the art who it's intended for. A rogue dagger will be much more visceral, with a huge blade with spikes and dragon heads on the hilt, whereas a caster dagger might look more fragile, ethereal, and infused with energy, and less like it's meant for stabbing you in the face. What about the items outside of instances? Almost any time you pick an item up off a creature in the game, it's not an item meant to complete a quest. We're responsible for placing that. Dungeons, raids, itemizing quest rewards, determining the random world drops and random epic drops. When you're killing wolves in a zone, we determine what the flavor loot is. We're also responsible for attaching loot to any given world event boss, like Ahune, the Frost Lord. The team that makes the world events and holidays will tell us the vibe of the holiday and maybe a really cool look. A good example would be the Headless Horseman's Helm. This is the Astrilian and others, ton of work into the game. This is the team. They went outside by the parking lot for a picture on that one. The one I keep around for sentimental value to this day is Finkel Skinner. It's cool. It's like a little gnome spelunker coming out of there. Dave Maldonado told me it would be really awesome if we could drop this helm that pops off and flies around during the hot fight. I made the helm and gave it stats, so it's functionally a good item for players, and then you took it and kicked it up a notch, so whenever you right-click your helm, you do the awesome laugh. The item team as a whole collaborates a lot with the rest of the systems team to help come up with new ideas to add to the game. What new professions can come up with, how should we revamp the talent system, etc. But at the end of the day, we're directly responsible for kill dragon, get sword. The Stoppable Force. Born of designer delirium, this mace became a favorite among the gold-conscious and irony-aware adventurers of Outland. Everyone has some favorite items, whether it's for looks, stats, or sentimental value. What are your personal favorite items? I'm wondering if Chris is going to say steamy romance novel. I haven't seen that one drop in a long time, but I have gotten that. When we were doing the Burning Crusade, I was building the items you could get from pickpocketing creatures, and I wanted to put something interesting on the pickpocket table. Yeah, it is still there. So I put the steamy romance novel on a human. I didn't write a story, I just created the item. At some point, John saw this item and started adding a story to it. And he put a sequel on additional items. The silly items are the ones I think of the most. I saw the icon for a clownfish, so I made a pickpocket item called Shark Bait with Just Keep Swimming as the flavor text. I don't know who made it, but the Stoppable Force. I think that was when I was delirious at some point during the Burning Crusade, knowing I had to make junk loot for everything in the game. This was at the height of the PvP items, the Unstoppable Force, and the Immovable Object. I just found the crappiest icon I could, and I thought, the Stoppable Force. I swear, every time I saw that thing drop off a creature for the entire length of the Burning Crusade, I just chuckled. The only thing I could think of was the power converter with a bunch of Star Wars references from the Show Them No Mercy quest. You set it off expecting a big explosion. The tooltip says, use destroys technological terror constructs. People don't get that joke in the Star Wars reference. Okay, yeah, I love it because people don't get the joke. Bryn Troll was named after this really obscure Viking battle in England in like the 800s or something. One guy hit another guy with a weapon called a Bryn Troll, and an archaeologist had no idea what that weapon even was. I always loved the name. You probably can't even find it on Google. You'll find references to World of Warcraft instead. Distant Land was a horse I won money on when I was too young to bet on horses. The one I keep around for sentimental value to this day is Finkel's Skinner. Way back in classic World of Warcraft, there was a monster in Upper Blackrock Spire called the Beast, and very rarely he would drop this item called Finkel's Skinner. If you skinned him, out would pop Finkel Einhorn. I always got a kick out of that, and have kept the dagger around ever since. Weapons from Arthas are fine, but for many guilds, the most sought-after item in Icecrown Citadel is Precious Ribbon. Precious is Ribbon. Do you plan on having more items like that in the game? It's amazing how much value players will place on something with no player power at all just because it's rare and cool. They love it. And it scales forever. You'll be best in show for as long as you want to. As far as novelty items go, we love hiding them in fun places. Someone else had the idea for Precious, and I saw that ribbon and cracked up. I had to put it as a drop. We love that stuff and always want to do more, but if we put Precious's ribbon on every boss with a different flavor for every raid tier, it would start to become a little desensitizing. That's true. Yeah. I don't know if we planned any of those in advance. We don't even know if or when those opportunities are going to come up. You want to have humor in the game, but you don't want it to dominate, particularly when you're in Icecrown Citadel going up to fight the Lich King. The players don't take it that seriously, but you want the best in show ribbon. You don't want the best in show ribbon to drop off Arthas either. Are there plans for more dual items like Benediction Anathema or class quest items? The problem with items that change like Benediction is that the enchantment system doesn't handle it. What really happens when you switch is that the item gets destroyed and you get a new item, which means any enchant that you had is lost. So if you get Shadow Strike off Onyxia in the current game, it just gives you both versions to play with. This guy says I had to buff about 600 items because we couldn't nerf one subset of items. 2 items caused us to have to buff everything in the game. That's Benediction and Anathema. That's crazy. We've had a lot of talks about class weapons over the years. I'll say this, they're fun, and we love to do it more, but they're also time intensive, and in the current environment, they'd be much harder to implement in a way that feels as epic as it did back when the original Rockdalar and Benediction were implemented. Queldalar is probably the way. That's probably what we'll do in the future, something like that. Another problem with doing a class-specific quest is ensuring we can do it for other classes. Players ask, why do hunters get the quest? When's the rogue's turn? When's the ret paladin's turn? We can't do it unless we do it for all the classes, and if you do it for all classes, it's an immense amount of work. It's not just that, it's almost impossible to strike the balance. Why do you want Arthas' weapon if you just finished this epic questline at the same time? Are you going to be upset when Arthas drops this awesome sword, but your sword is better? What about 2 or 3 months later when the next raid tier comes out? How do we replace that weapon altogether? I think we all love what those were. We put a lot of effort and focus into those kinds of epic questlines and storylines, so there's definitely a place for items like that. I just don't think we're as willing anymore to break those out into class-specific huge epic storylines, which is what they do like in Classic. is this where legendary items come in. Usually it's just a matter of if we have an awesome hook, and if we have the time to really flesh out the awesome idea. We want them to feel really epic and challenging to attain, like Valinir, between the drop rates of whatever things you need to collect and the other outside tasks you have to do. The expected time frame for a player to get the legendary in the most generous case is about a month and a half. Since we expect it to take a considerable amount of time to attain these items, we're also more willing to let these items not be replaced in the next tier of content. Valinir was a perfect example. When players finally completed it, they moved into the Crusaders Coliseum on the PTR and found that, what the hell, my Valinir is crap now, which obviously was not our intention, and so we adjusted the stats. It's okay for legendaries to have longer lives than other items because we know few people are going to have access to them. It's not like your entire raid is going to have weapons that are so good that they don't replace them for 3 tiers of raid content. Valinir is still alive and well today in Icecrown Heroic modes. You'll replace it with a lovely green in Mount Hyjal. Yeah, that's true. Are there ideas for items that you liked but just didn't work out? The original Deathbringer's Will. Originally it transformed you into more races. They were cooler, like you were able to turn into a Wolvar or turn into a Tuskar. The Frost Giant was coolest by far, but there were animation issues, so it got trimmed back. I spent a bit of time when we were working on Wrath of the Lich King trying to flesh out an artifact system, including how that would impact raid progression or item progression in the game, and there were all the crazy ideas about how your weapon leveled up, and they actually did eventually implement that, not that long after this. Yeah, toying with ideas like weapons leveling up, which would have been fun up until the point you realized you're never replacing the weapon, or that when you do replace it, you feel bad because you put all this effort into developing it. So eventually we decided World of Warcraft just didn't need that. Legendaries had a good place. They felt meaningful. They felt like items you could invest time in and carry on afterward, but we didn't want that to become commonplace in the endgame content. There are all these engineering items that I tried to make that didn't work out. I tried to make one that duplicated you. It duplicated your exact look, and if anybody hit it, it would explode. But it ended up being too expensive to show another version of you, so I ended up making a rabbit instead. Are there any items that you consider to be mistakes? Thunder Fury comes to mind. The original thought... Let's see, this is them playing... Oh, this guy has them up. Okay. A couple Frostmournes, a Doomhammer, and then versus some mops and stuff. Just another day at the office. The item design team gets a kick out of playing with their creations, sometimes even outside World of Warcraft. I mean, that's cool. Valinir, Frozen Shadowweave, Quel'Dalar. Hey, let's make an item that slows things it hits. That got the okay because people thought it meant reduces movement speed. Unfortunately, there was some miscommunication. It was implemented as an attack speed reduction proc, which turned out to be stronger than every other similar effect in the game. Because of that, we ended up having to buff the respective class abilities before the weapon could finally be put down. Alright, so working with the item budget. The World of Warcraft item designers work within a budget, which basically is a set of rules and limitations to determine which stats will go on a piece of gear. Game designer Jonathan LeCraft describes the budgeting process. In a nutshell, if you know the color like green, blue, or purple in item level, you get a power level, which is one number to describe how powerful an item is. You then chop that up into separate stat pools to make an item. However, as you split the stats more ways, you actually get a greater total sum, so we do put limitations on that. Going back to the Frozen Shadowweave problem, that occurred because we gamed our own system to make something broken. It's a set of rules, but it can be broken, so we've kind of learned that. Huh. One of the items that I wish someone could go back and derail would be Blackhand's Breath. NT's Quenched Sword. This humble gray item caused quite a tumult in PvP circles, so its level requirements got a lusty revision. Frozen Shadowweave. The mistake there was that the items crafted from it have nothing but offensive stats on them, which made players who equipped them do way more damage than they were supposed to, and made them feel like the items in their raid tier just weren't very good because they didn't have as many offensive stats. Then the characters were really, really fragile and died when you breathed on them funny. If we're going to talk about Frozen Shadowweave, I'll give you the fun short story about the whole debacle. When you're looking at an entire expansion as a whole in spreadsheets, at a certain point it just becomes a haze of numbers. Back then we were pretty stingy with the rate at which we replaced your gear, so item levels incremented slowly, and the socketing system was entirely conceptual at that point. We really didn't understand how it would impact the items that we were making, so as a result, just looking at numbers on the spreadsheet, you'd say, that's reasonable, it's within our stat budget, so it can't be broken. What ended up happening is that you had crafted items attainable only by a certain subset of classes at the beginning of the expansion that were better than anything 3 raid tiers later. It just completely threw out of whack the entire intended balance between the classes because Shadow Priests and Warlocks basically had a 3-patch leg up on everyone else. When we went to nerf those items and put the new versions on the test realm, the community exploded. Shadow Priests had aneurysms. This was back when most players couldn't access raid content, so for many these were the best items they were ever going to see, so it really fundamentally upset them that we were nerfing them. Instead of nerfing them, we decided to revert the change and buff every other item in the game. I think I spent about 2 weeks hand buffing everything from Karazhan, Serpent Shrine Cavern, Tempest Keep, and Mount Hyjal. I had to buff about 600 items because we couldn't nerf one subset of items. 2 items caused us to have to buff everything in the game. One of the items that I wish someone could go back in time and derail would be Black Hand's Breath. It was the first trinket with real serious player power on it and increased critical strike rating. Up until that point, trinkets were supposed to be cool, fun flavor effects that didn't really make you much more powerful. Trinkets were toys. But as soon as that item was created and players had it, every trinket from that point forward had to be about player power. So you lost the opportunity for a cool toy in every tier. Sometimes mistakes don't have such drastic results. I once put in a little hidden flavor item on a giant in Dragon Blight. Just this gray sword called Enti's Quenched Sword. It was a fiery sword that had been quenched out, so I made it have really low damage, or so I thought. It turned out the way I made it have really low damage actually gave it a massive damage range. So for low-level characters, it was by far the best weapon they could equip. You had little low-level warriors running around 1 and 2 shouting guys for an entire patch. Sometimes you just get funny results like that. Weird. When the Burning Crusade first went live, there was a weapon up in Netherstorm that did only arcane damage. If you had any spell power, the spell power would channel through the weapon and would hit for your total spell power plus weapon damage, so it was insane. We had to hotfix that one in a hurry to get things back to normal. Trinkets like the Talisman of Ephemeral Power and Zandalarian Hero Charm were huge mistakes that made us have to make big balance changes afterward. We no longer build items where the entire budget is that hyper-focused. The other thing that's equally important is to make sure you can't click multiple items. It used to be you could click the Talisman of Ephemeral Power and Zandalarian Hero Charm in immediate succession, which gave you a huge amount of spell power back to back. So mages could go click, click, palm, presence of mind, pyroblast, you're dead. What we no longer do is front load the entire trinket. We made a Zandalarian Hero Charm like trinket since then, but instead of starting with the entire budget up front and getting weaker, we build into the awesome effects, but they're not immediately insane. I have to say, like, from the, spreadsheety, nerdy, mathy kind of perspective, that otherwise very dry article was actually pretty cool. Like, my mind was just kind of churning the whole time. Like, I would absolutely be part of that process and do that. Like, I would 100% do that as a job. Just work with that and build items, even in whatever iteration they're using nowadays. It'd be really cool. All right, everybody, we got another episode in the pipe, 5x5, and we're going to look at auction house stuff next time we read. But thanks, everyone, for joining, for tuning in, and I will see you all next time on the next episode of Lore of Warcraft. See ya.